Look, let's start with the government's political decision to break a firm election promise and scrap those stage 3 tax cuts. The Prime Minister, as we've been playing for you this afternoon, said this was a solemn promise.
I can confirm that we haven't changed our position.
We have no change to our plans. Tax cuts will happen in July.
We haven't changed our position. I've said we haven't changed our position. We haven't changed our position on the stage 3 tax cuts. We have not changed our position on stage 3 tax cuts. They've been legislated. We support them. Our position hasn't changed.
As early as this year, for goodness sakes. Now, the next election will tell whether the government's rewarded by lower income earners by this move or whether it's seen as hypocritical for breaking such a solemn oath. Now, we'll get to Cassandra Windsor, Chief Economist of the Committee for the Economic Development in Australia shortly. But first, some stats from the tax office itself. Now, in 2021, the top 1% of taxpayers who earn more than $377,000 a year paid 18.3% of total income tax. The top 10%, who earn more than $137,000 a year, paid 46% of the tax, as you can see. Look here, the bottom 50% of taxpayers, they pay 11.6% of income tax. So let's drill down into this a little bit more, shall we? The tax office says there are 3.93 million people who earn $45,000 a year or less. Collectively, they pay $828 million in tax, but they claim $7.3 billion in tax back from the government. In other words, they receive around $6.5 billion more from the government than they pay in tax itself. They are not net taxpayers. Now take people who earn more than $148,000 a year, the top 10%, if you like. Well, the tax office says there are just over a million of them. Collectively, they pay $21.4 billion in tax each year, but they claim $4.2 billion in deductions. They pay net tax of $17.2 billion. Now tell me, who needs a tax cut right now? Those who pay tax already or those who collect more from the government than they pay, who, by the way, have already had the lion's share of benefit from the first 2 stages of these tax cuts? Well, Cassandra Windsor is the Chief Economist of the Committee for Economic Development based in Perth and joins me now. Cassandra, many thanks. The scrapping of that 37 cents in the dollar tax bracket was seen to be the only genuine and progressive tax reform by the Morrison government. Is it good policy for the Albanese government to leave it there now?
So look, the core feature and the reason that a lot of economists have been calling for some revisions to these tax cuts is the economic environment that we're in, which is quite different from where we were a few years ago when these were first put in place. And we really need to take into account the inflationary aspects of these tax cuts, and particularly when we know who's really struggling with cost of living pressures at the moment, which is not high income earners. We do think there is a real reason to shift the distribution of the tax cuts or potentially also the timing of them so that we're not adding to inflation, but we're also looking at how we can improve cost of living pressures on the households doing it toughest.